First thing, Deir city is very famous because Deir people are also well known as warriors. The UK has been defeated with like a battle on the ground in two places in the world, United States of America and Deir Zor. Then they gave it up to France to get rid of it. Anyway, so I came from like a family. My father was a businessman. At the same time, my mom was a chief of school, and that has given me the advantage of having the tools of being like of learning from the business experiences and the elite community in Syria, because my father was a powerful businessman, and at the same time has given me the education. And both tools, I have used them later on when I went through a lot of things, like a lot of good friends of mine. They say like I have an interesting life story. I always reply, I'm just like the Jewish ancestors who spent their life always surviving. So my life is about surviving. It has been about surviving, and it's still so far as a Syrian. And I'm doing well because I mixed it like some Jewish like tactics with what I have learned, with the tools that my parents have provided me to keep surviving.
So you are a young man still when the Syrian revolution begins in 2011. You quickly become involved. Can you tell us a little bit about what's happening when the Syrian revolution begins in your city, and how a bit later you found yourself not just involved in the Syrian revolution, but also fighting against ISIS and Al-Qaeda, working with the Americans and with the Free Syrian Army?
So first thing, Deir Zor right now is the most destroyed city in the whole Syria, according to the World Bank. And this is again because we are warriors. My city is the first city not only fought with against Assad and against Iran and against Russia. It also has been like under a big, tough besiege from both sides, like ISIL and the Assad regime. So we fought against both, and we paid for that by having like 95% of my city's population are like are refugees or are displaced people, as well as like my family has paid a heavy price for that. Not only we've lost everything, which
You've lost your brother too.
yeah, my brother was tortured to death in a jihadi prison. He was tortured for 11 days to death. And I survived the torture from the Assad regime as well. And here I want to point out something that that we share, like we are here in this room not because we only share the enemies, we share the interests as well. We share the potential, and the potential here will be Damascus, Jerusalem. But also we are here in this room because we share the consequences of like the evilness and the consequences of the brutality of our shared enemies.
So Mzahem, you left Syria in 2013, really escaping after your home is destroyed, your family is not all intact. You found yourself in Turkey, you found yourself in a few other places, and you begin to get a perspective from the outside a little bit about the world, about Syria and about the region. Can you share something about what you began to see when you began to zoom out a little bit and looking at the war that's happening in your country?
So first thing, when the revolution has begun, I was just like so young and naive. I believed that, like many of other Syrians, 90% of the Syrians, we thought it will be just like Egypt, 18 days, and the Assad will be removed. I remember like one moment when the first 14 Kalashnikovs were smuggled to my city from Iraq. And when people were talking about it, my father said something. He was very close to the elite, and he's very well experienced businessman. He said, Syria will not be liberated, and it will go to a whole destruction. This brutal regime will bring us the jihadis from Iraq. And then I looked at him by then like in a very aggressive way, because by then we were pretty naive and we thought that we're gonna liberate the whole Syria within those 14 Kalashnikovs. The second thing, I was like a secular atheist, so things were for me like black or white. But then I learned that if you share interests with people, which is the Jewish way of surviving again. And it has been the strategy that the first generation of the Israeli leadership have used to build up a promising country out of like 3,000 years of like horrific experiences. And the third fact, I learned that not Deir Zor, neither Syria are the center of the universe. The world is bigger. So because of that, we have to create an interest, and we have to create our own oil and our own interest and share it with people and collaborate with everyone in the region to build up, to bring Syria to peace, and then to bring the whole region to the peace. The last point that I want to mention is that I have learned that things, again, are not about black and white. But like from the Israeli perspective, in 2011 or 2012, I was 18, 19 by then. I wrote a post. Within that post, I said, it's still on my Facebook, that the only solution with Israel will be like peace. And we have to negotiate over water, and we have to negotiate over Golan and give it as a shared space for duty-free and for water. By then, a lot of people attacked me. And then later on, when I start like talking with this tone, because I believe in what I'm doing, people start attacking me, and people start like conducting campaigns against me. Later on, like after the 7th of October terrorist attack, a lot of Syrians were talking about we need peace with Israel to make the regime fallen, and to rebuild Syria and to relieve sanctions. So this is one of the points that I have never changed, but I growth a knowledge more and more around it, and I growth like more experiences around it, and it has reflected later on the role we are playing right now in converting Syria in a meeting of interest is, let's say, point around the region.
So we'll get in a second to October 7 and the aftermath, but you already spoke about the things 3 times, about the Jewish way of doing things. When was the first time you've met a Jew or an Israeli? You grew up as the Jews and Israelis as your enemies, no?
Yeah, that's one of the most interesting things. Like, I came from east of Syria, a tribal conservative community. But again, the education that I have gotten, and I was raised by a businessman, has given me like this opportunity to see things from a different corner. The first Jew I met in my life, he was a rabbi. I was going through a trauma of my brother's death, and I wanted to do something crazy that will definitely lead to kill me, to take my revenge. And then he sat with me. I was by then poor. And he told me, you have to learn how to survive. Your problem is that you want to cross the door carrying on all of Syria on your shoulder. You cannot like rescue the world. Get more powerful, and when you're more powerful, you will help more people. And it took me a year and a half to recognize that. So when I started using the tools that I have and the connections, and then I got more and more involved into the career that I'm doing right now, it has really helped me right now. We have big influence. We are fighting against like all of our mutual enemies, and it's helped me as well to help poor people all around the world, as well as the indirect way of helping is by building bridges, as well as fighting against terrorists and bad people all over the planet.
So unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time, so we have to jump quite a bit forward. 13 years after you left Syria, you came back to Syria. Actually, literally 2 weeks ago. And this time you came back really as an emissary. And you're back from a series of meetings with people from the new government, with leaders of civic society, with people who had been or became colleague of yours. Can you share something about your discussions and give us something about the possible future you begin to see in Syria?
First thing, that operation was like a suicidal operation for me, and I didn't dare to text my friend Rabbi, my older friend Rabbi, and telling him I'm going to Syria, because he will think that the lesson that he was trying to teach me, I didn't learn from that. But I took that risk for multiple noble reasons, as you know. I went there because I was motivated with the fact that America has no interest in Syria, has no interest in Lebanon, as well as we have a new American administrations that they want to bring the war back to 1939. That means we have an enemy on our borders, on the joint borders of Israel, the joint borders of Syria, the joint borders of Jordan, of the Gulf states. And this enemy is called Iran, and its Sunni and Shiite and Kurdish allies on the ground. And these allies are the worst enemies that we have ever had since the Nazis have had the opportunity to commit the Holocaust against the Jewish people. So my point of view was like, let's create mutual interests throughout like influential people in the West who share the same values that we share, whatever is their religion. And taking it out of there, we can invest into that, like creating these interests and bringing the country to be developed again, and as well as we have like a control over that. The second point that I was motivated with, right now in Syria, the situation is like super complicated. And that complications, but in the middle of those complications and those challenges, we have, let's say 25, 30% of its leadership, including the Syrian presidency the new Syrian presidency for your information. They believe and they have the will and they have the intention of rebuilding the country, and rebuilding the country under the rules of peace, under the rules of like, we don't want to be involved in any other conflicts. Let's make peace in the region and let's rebuild the country. And this is one of the things that the third Israeli leadership, they did not invest in. This is the power of the Israeli brand that the first generation of the Israeli leadership have invested in to make. In the 50s and 60s and 70s, during the coup era that was backed by Russia and the Soviet Union, it was always, if you want legitimacy, you have to start a war against Israel, adopt some Palestinian terrorist organizations, and then get the legitimacy out of that. Even if you lost the war, you just like build up a propaganda around it that I made a victory, then you get the legitimacy. Right now, there is a new convince in the whole region, including into the new Syrian presidency. If you want to build your country, if you want to build a promising country that looks like Saudi Arabia, UAE, and the other Gulf states, you need a peace with Israel. So Israel has to invest into that potential, into that corner, and it has to understand this point.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, Mzahem. And in the last minute, you have a room here that has a number of Israeli leaders and policymakers, a number of European policymakers. Of course, we've all heard about the recent reports, engagements, conversations between Israelis and Syrians. Is there a message that you would like to pass either to the Israeli or to the European policymakers about how can we make Syria great again?
Okay, so quickly, I would just want to start with a small point. I will be very quick answering this question because I have a conclusion that I want, if you can give me 2 minutes. But starting with answering the question, I understand very well that the current Israeli leadership, they look into things through the trauma of the 7th of October terrorist attack. And I'm really surprised that no one in this room has used the word of terrorists when they call for Hamas or for Iran, for any of their proxies. And none of them has said the word of 7th of October terrorist attack. We have to emphasize and we have to put it into the head of everyone that it was a terrorist attack that has started the whole craziness that we see right now in the Middle East to serve the Iranian agenda. So they are not only terrorists, they are mercenaries for Iran. And this is how I call them on social media. I don't even call their name. On the other hand, the worst thing about the 7th of October terrorist attack, it was telling us one fact, that Iran and its Shiite and Sunni proxies and allies, they didn't repeat what Hitler has done to the Jews in Europe. They didn't repeat what they have done right there, not because they can't or they have more ethical boundaries. They did it just because they can't. When they had the opportunity for 3 hours to do something, they have done unimaginable things. And this will lead us to a point, and like a similar point in Syria. In Syria, when we have opened like the detainees, and I have lost not only my brother, many friends of mine were found like when Syria was liberated, they have killed them at the last hours in unimaginable way. We shared this enemy. Right now, we have through this traumatic policy or traumatic vision towards policy. Unfortunately, the current Israeli leadership, it has built a very mistaken policy over Syria by supporting something called like protecting minorities. Right now, and I will be happy to share an article that we provided some knowledge out of like some pieces of evidence we have. Under this policy of protecting minorities, Israel is supporting groups that they were historically Iranian assets, and it's becoming an enemy of groups in southern Syria, in the northeast of Syria, and in the coastal provinces. They were participating in supporting, providing buffer zones, and providing allowing money, not from Israel, and equipment to go to them. Those groups who were historically the enemies of Iran, they have leveraged that Israeli protection into a way to build up their own capacity. So strategically what we are repeating the 7th of October scenario, in which way later on when we have a peace agreement between Jerusalem and Damascus, we will have well-equipped groups that they were historically Iranian assets, and those groups, they will have only Iran backing them again and using them again to attack Israel and to attack the new Syria. And they are doing right now in the coastal provinces. We have groups that we have pieces of evidence on them, actionable pieces of evidence on them. They were backed, they were equipped, financed by by Iran. And these groups, Israel provided them buffer zone, and it was participating and pushing propaganda in their favor.
Concluding sentence?
Can I conclude with 1 minute? I promise 1 minute. There is
concluding sentence.
Okay, so you have concluding sentence. You have the power of the Israeli brand that has been built on 3,300 pain, you know? And the first generation of the Israeli leadership were able to build a great brand out of that because they have believed in that pain, because they lived part of it during the Holocaust. Like since the era of Moses, you had to cross the sea to survive. Then you had the Roman Empire. Then you had, but the first generation, how did they made the brand of Israel? It took them 33 years from like 1948 until the 80s to tell the world that Israel is a strong ally and it's a state there to stay. They have done by two things: by fighting when the fight exists, and by making peace when they made peace with Egypt and Jordan. When they took the advantage, they took the potential. So right now, to support that brand, it takes you 3,300 to come to awareness of how powerful building such a promising experience. 33 years to work on establishing a brand, but it takes 33 months only to destroy a brand. So you have lost 6 months of this potential right now. You still have 27 months. So my advice to you is that take advantage of this potential. Meanwhile, keep fighting against terrorists. Don't show them tolerance, but they take the potential of Syria. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Shukran jazilan Mzahem. We have 3 Syrians in this conference, perhaps another interesting for the changing times. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nir, and thank you, Elnet, again.